Brought to you by Life, Captain Crunch, King Vitamin.
Cleo's beautiful television model was mixed up with an international smuggling ring. I tried real hard to prove she was innocent, but innocent girls are just scarcer than fleas on a cue ball these days. You'll see what I mean on McCloud on the NBC Mystery Movie, Sunday night at 8:30, 7:30 Central Time, right here on NBC.
The assaults and the deaths, the assaults to inmates, the assaults to employees, conditions under which I do not believe that the loved ones of the inmates, their families and children, should be able to come to the institution and visit under.
Norfolk District Attorney George Burke, who was also present, praised the results of the search and announced that several men from the prison had been transferred to other maximum security institutions.
I'm very pleased that the Commissioner has seen fit to transfer these prisoners that I've been requesting to be transferred, because I've always felt that if you break up the ringleaders within a prison system, that you'd be able to run that prison much easier. And also that you would cut down on the violence and deaths, which have been of enormous proportion this past year.
Eyewitness newsman Jack Cole reported today that of the 10 inmates transferred out of Walpole, 6 will go to federal prisons. Cole quotes sources who cannot be publicly identified as saying, "These 10 men are members of organized crime who have been running the mob interests while behind prison bars. And they've been doing that by controlling the flow of drugs and other contraband into the prison." The 10 men who were transferred reportedly represent both sides of the Boston gang wars of several years ago, and sources say that that gang war is continuing inside the prison, accounting for a number of inmate murders. And prison officials think they'll be able to maintain better order at Walpole now with these 10 inmates transferred out of that locality. Concerning Vietnam tonight, the North Vietnamese charge that we have violated our commitment for bombing halt above the 20th parallel by bombing many populated areas in a province southeast of Hanoi. And Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird has ordered a news blackout on any subject which could endanger those Paris peace talks. Mr. Laird implied that order originated at the White House, but he made no further comment. Henry Kissinger met with 2 envoys from South Vietnam in Washington today. On Monday, he returns to more secret talks in Paris. And also today, in the French capital, American and North Vietnamese experts continued their technical level talks in preparation for next week's secret meetings. President Nixon told congressional leaders today that Hanoi has agreed to enter the next stage of peace talks with serious intentions. A statement came at a breakfast meeting which dealt mainly with our economy.
It was the president's first meeting with the full leadership of both houses of Congress since before the election. The session lasted an hour and a half, including a 10-minute briefing by the president on the status of the Vietnam peace talks. The president did not discuss the substance of the talks, nor did he allow questions. Later, Democratic Senator Frank Moss described the briefing.
The president used the same old phrases of wanting peace, but it had to be peace with honor. And seems to me that's where we've been hung up before. What is peace with honor?
What impression did you get about his feeling toward the round of talks that resumes on Monday in Paris?
Well, I didn't think he was too optimistic. I thought that he, although he continued to reiterate that he hoped that they would be successful, he also made sure that he recognized that they might not be successful.
But you understand that if they are not successful, he will resume the bombing?
Well, I would think the implication was that, because he simply stated the fact of the reason of the bombing, and the reason they stopped was because North Vietnamese had said now they would come back. They gave us a signal that they would come back, he said. Yes, I had the impression we'd go right through it again.
Later, White House Press Secretary Ron Ziegler told newsmen the president had acknowledged congressional opposition to his Vietnam policy, but that Mr. Nixon felt that it is his responsibility to pursue a negotiated settlement in Vietnam, a settlement which allows for the release of U.S. prisoners of war, which calls for a ceasefire, which includes both Cambodia and Laos, and which allows South Vietnam to determine its own destiny. Gordon Graham, NBC News, at the White House.
What attracts a woman to a man to a woman? The
Secrets of Sexual Attraction explains in Man and Woman, a guide in plain words and clear pictures to help you understand yourself and others better. Week by week, Man and Woman builds into an encyclopedia of adult relationships. It can tell you things you may never have learned anywhere else.
Wow, what a great store.
Hey, don't let me forget the coffee.
The way your coffee tastes, why bother?
Here. Try some of this. What kind?
I only sell one kind. Maxwell House. If anybody knows beans about coffee, they do.
Hey, that's terrific.
Good to the last drop.
Hon, your mom used Maxwell House.
More than likely. Maxwell House has been around near as long as I have. Got a flavor all its own. You can make it good as I can.
Hey, Cora, now I get as good coffee home as I had here.
Not surprising. Doesn't matter who's doing the making, long as it's Maxwell House. What? Good to the last drop.
Be court-martialed on charges of sabotage during an act of war. The ruling is the first by any court that the Vietnam situation is, in fact, a war, even though it has not been so declared by Congress. And the Pentagon Papers trial hit a new snag today. The defense admitted one of its volunteer workers had discussed that case with 3 prospective jurors. And so the government called that jury tampering, and the judge dismissed those 3 jurors. And there was a new development today in the Watergate bugging incident.
A final hearing before the start of Monday's trial, a lawyer for Democrats whose phones were tapped startled even the judge. He said the government would claim that those who bugged and burgled the Watergate did so for private blackmail rather than political intelligence gathering for the Republicans. The prosecution did not refute the claim. The judge said, "It's the first time I've heard that." It's your impression that the prosecution, that the government will attempt to show that the motive for going into the Watergate by these defendants was blackmail, not politics.
I made a statement in court to that effect.
That's substantially what you said.
And the statement speaks for itself, yes.
Is that the first time you've heard that charge?
First time I've heard it.
Do you take that to mean blackmail for money rather than political purposes?
Entirely speculative, but I can tell you it's completely without foundation.
Walsh's client, James McCord, the former security chief for the Republicans, said nothing. Defense lawyers indicate their basic line of argument may be that those caught in the bugging operation had no thought of personal gain, but are scapegoats who were carrying out a plan approved at a higher level. Carl Stern, NBC News at the federal courthouse in Washington.
Governor Sargent announced today that the Commerce and Development Department and the Department of Manpower Affairs will be merged in a state reorganization move. And the governor was asked about allegations in this morning's Herald American, allegations which infer that the practice of hiring consultants for state jobs now amounts to a scandal.
In many instances, department heads have had to use consultants because of the restrictions and the complications of hiring, the restrictions and the complications of civil service, and they've had to hire consultants to do a specific job for a specific period of time. When the thing gets out of hand, when it becomes inappropriate, when it gets out of hand, when it's inappropriate is when a consultant isn't really a consultant, but it's a continuing thing, and the person has been a consultant for a period of years.
Is the 03 out of hand now, Go?
Problems in the 03 area, yes, and there always have been. And then when we're tightening it up right now.
Dr. Jerome Miller, the Commissioner of Youth Services for Massachusetts, is leaving the Bay State for a similar post in Illinois. Miller's appointment was announced in Chicago today and confirmed later in a news conference here. Eyewitness newsman Peter Mahegan reports.
During his 3 turbulent years as Commissioner of Youth Services, Jerome Miller closed down all the state's large juvenile institutions and moved delinquent youngsters into smaller community-based treatment centers. He told reporters today that Massachusetts is the national leader in the treatment of youthful offenders and that he feels obligated to bring these reforms to other larger states.
As I go around to states, they all say, we really like what's happened in Massachusetts. You're out of the training schools. We want to do it here. But Massachusetts is an anomaly. And then with the last election, they say that proves it. I don't really think that's true. And I think it's an opportunity, really, to carry what we've done here and what the people of Massachusetts have allowed us to do to other states, which is very important. Massachusetts, you know, was the leader in juvenile corrections in the middle 1800s. They invented training schools as a way of getting kids out of prisons. They kind of showed the way to the rest of the nation. And it's important now that they show the way again. So I really leave here, in a sense, carrying a message, if you will, on the basis of what we've done from the people of this Commonwealth to the rest of the country. Massachusetts does stand alone, and it's important now that this go elsewhere and that it be done elsewhere.
Dr. Miller singled out Governor Sargent for special thanks, calling him a decent, good man who stuck with me at times when it wasn't to his political advantage to do so. He also had a word for those who have been in his care.
I don't think you get many satisfactions in this job, but if I've gotten any satisfactions in it, it really only has been from the youngsters in the department. And I want to thank them for making a very important 3 years in my life, probably the most important 3 years I've ever had. Thanks much.
From medical research on pain other than headache comes documented evidence that Excedrin is significantly more effective than the common aspirin tablet. At a leading university in 1964, at one of the nation's major hospitals in 1969, two separate research studies with the same result. Excedrin, significantly more effective than common aspirin. Try Excedrin, the extra-strength pain reliever. Simple diarrhea can come from food bacteria, virus germs, strange water, impurities that pollute your digestive system. Left untreated, diarrhea makes you feel weak, wrung out. Why suffer? Kaopectate checks diarrhea. Many doctors recommend it. Kaopectate's main ingredient absorbs impurities from this fluid, like it absorbs impurities from your digestive system. Kaopectate absorbs impurities as it checks diarrhea.
If you want to cut your food costs, take a tip from these A&P WEO shoppers.
Yes, I stay in a run a week, the way I shop. Maybe about $10.
As I've gone up the street, up to the other shop near, and the prices are considerably lower here.
But whatever I buy, groceries on a whole, it's much cheaper.
My cousin and I generally come here because things are cheaper.
Come on in. Let A&P WEO's wild warehouse prices save you money. The Celtics broke fast and ran hard all the way tonight, and with sports, here's Clark Booth.
It separates them. The Atlanta Hawks were so many tame and subservient sparrows this evening. The Hawks went without Lou Hudson. The Celts sprinted into an 8-0 lead. The Hawks cut it to 10-7. Then the Celts sprinted once more, and that pretty much did it.
White against Maravich, and JoJo White scores his first bucket, moving against Maravich. It's now 18-10. White is on Herm Gilliam, number 3. Underneath to Jim Washington, a pretty pass. Washington still battling for it. Silas comes down with the rebound. To Havlicek, to Cheney. A 3-on-1. Havlicek goes in by himself and scores.
Through the second half, the Celts maintained a leisurely 20-plus lead without serious incident.
Sanders, tapped away, taken by JoJo White. Sanders. Fine defensive play. Havlicek shooting and scoring.
Havlicek finished with 30. The Knicks also won a ho-hummer. The Chicago Bulls lost to the Suns, and the Kansas City Omahas edged Detroit. On the campus, Princeton 71, Harvard 70, in hockey, BC 8, St. Louis 5. Baltimore beat the Braves 6-4. The Patriots did not officially land Joe Paterno today, but you get the feeling he knows the urgency of the situation with the draft approaching, and Paterno is above playing petty games. So plainly, Paterno is seducible. Had the Patriots succeeded, well, the New York Daily News thinks that they have. The news says that Paterno has accepted a 5-year, $200,000 per year contract to become the new Foxborough babysitter. Now, the source of their story is interesting. The news claims that the Pats' New York-based stockholders are very upset because they believe Paterno could have been signed for half the price. Now, that suggests that influential stockholders McConnell and Wettenhall are on the warpath, and those chaps have never been charter members of the Billy Sullivan fan club. If the Paterno deal falls through, you can surmise that Sullivan will be in for some rough times with the board of directors, even those who have been dutifully reverent to Bill's whims over the years. There is apprehension in the board's ranks over Billy's total investment in Paterno. If the deal falls through, Sully is going to have to come up with some answers. But tonight, the signs, though they be tenuous, point the other way. Tonight, Joe Paterno looks like a pretty good bet. We should know for sure no later than Monday. On the 6 o'clock edition, we got our mountains mixed up. Let it be said right here, mean and clear, that Jean-Claude Calais will lead the Grand Prix Ski Titans down Mount Snow this weekend. In another major local sport...